Okay, so I'm John Green. I'm a senior software developer at the Stanford Center for uh, Professional Development, and I'll be presenting the Jonaldo. So let me share my screen. Look at the slides. Okay, okay. Hope everyone can see. So, okay, so this is a tool that Ollie and I created for managing the Drupal development on our team. And this was a team, like team activity, so wouldn't have been possible without um, all the support I get from my team, including Andrea, Ray, Rafael, Silva, and Alicia. They all helped in big and small ways. So let's see. Next. Okay, so this is the agenda. So we'll briefly talk about what is Jonaldo and the benefits of automation on simplified architecture, and then we'll go into a demo and do some Q&A. So what is Jonaldo? So Jonaldo is basically a combination of Ollie and I's name with Do to be kind of like Lando. So Jonaldo, it's really a streamlined process for our development, our Drupal development workflow. And, it makes it faster and easier. It also, has a lot of automation scripts that, make it easier for developers. And it has an isolated infrastructure, which we'll talk about later, that ensures that, it's secure from exposure. And let's go to the next slide. Okay, so some of the benefits of this process, since we automated everything, it reduced, a lot of the human error that would happen. Normally we would have to run a bunch of commands manually, and they would work sometimes, or sometimes, like, when you run the commands manually, sometimes just fat finger, make a typo. And with this process, it's not, it's a lot harder to do that. So reduces the repetitive tasks and saves us developers a lot of time. I don't have to go in there and set up everybody's system. I just created a bunch of scripts, and everybody goes and uses the scripts and taught everyone how to use it, and also documented it, so it makes things a lot easier for me and for everyone. It also ensures that we have a standardized environment, so the environment that one person's using is the exact same as someone else. So it makes it easier for other developers to work on each other's projects, because there's no mystery about how something's set up. So let's see. So this is a very simplified architecture. Before this, I tried to generate an architecture from the Terraform code that we have, but it was a lot too. It was way too much to fit on the slide here, so I created this drawing. So the basic process is, we have a bunch of production files. We have this one-way connection to an elastic file system. And, this is all in AWS, and I created this infrastructure in Terraform. So we'll look at that later, but so all these files, they come from production, they go into this elastic file system. There's no way for, someone to somehow get access to production through this connection because it only goes from one to the other. And then, the developer SSH is in, they have the files they need here. And on this server instance, there's a bunch of scripts, and we'll look at those scripts in a moment. But what those scripts allow the developers to do is to basically create as many development websites as they want. So we have this list of websites here. These aren't real URLs, but the idea is we have a bunch of subdomains, and we have subdomains on those subdomains. So what the scripts do is they modify the DNS and Route 53 so that we can just programmatically create, these second level subdomains and just create as many development instances as we need. So, okay, so let me show you how it works. Share this screen. So, actually, I'll just bring it to okay, here we go. So this is switch to the server. Okay, so you can see we're running Ubuntu. So I'll just go into. So what we have here is we have all the scripts, the streamline scripts here, and Kapow is the the developers that we work with. They're the ones that are using the scripts. So that's why it's called Kapow. And I'll just create one here. And then I'll kind of go over the process like at a high level in the code. So I'll call this Jonaldo 456. So right now it's copying the database. So we have these database backups here, which right now we still do manually, but we're going to automate that as well and put them in to the Elastic file system. So actually, this will take a few minutes. Let me bring up the code so we can talk about it. Share the code. Okay. Okay, so here we have the code. So we'll look at the main logic of the code here. So this is just a shell script with a few different functions. We have a cleanup option. we'll look at that later. That just cleans up the resources, everything that, so you can create a new, second level subdomain and then clean it up whenever you want. Which makes it really easy to just bring up servers and destroy them. So we'll create the logs, and the database, which we're just looking at. And after the database, it actually clones it from GitHub, from GitLab. And I used a feature of GitLab that allows you to create Git URLs that you can just set the permissions on. So we have a few read-only Git URLs that the developers can use to pull the latest code. And then they can optionally set up their own Git accounts if they want to change the code and push it. But wanted to keep, that's up to them to do. Want to keep everything here as, as simple and secure as possible. So then it goes into the Drupal setup and runs Composer and Drush and all the commands that are needed to set that up. And optionally, you can specify no code. So like this would just set up the directory for the site, and then you could just bring your own code. Then it sets up Apache and the DNS through Route 53. So let's look at, this is going over here. Okay, so it finished. You'll see exactly, what we're looking at there, except as the terminal output. So we have here at the top, very top, it's cloning, or it's taking the copy of the database, it's cloning the repository. And here it's setting up the Drupal site, so changing the settings at local, basically injecting different things into the settings local, like the database user and password. Then it restores these files from EFS, runs the drush, and at the end, I'll just share my whole screen. And at the end, what we get is this link that we can click on. And a fresh site. So this is our enterprise education site. Has all the images, has all the text and settings from the database. And now if you were, a developer, you could just go into this, into the directory for this. I'll just show you where that is. So yeah, here it is. So you can see have a few different test sites. You have the Jonaldo. So all this is standardized. So I know that if I go in this one, it'll have files in the same places as any of the other sites here. So let's look at Jonaldo. So when I created this, I'll just go over kind of these scripts. I tried to keep the scripts as like modular as I could. So we have this this new website script here. But I didn't want to basically force developers, to just create a new website every time, although that works. We also have scripts for restoring the database, the files, and updating the Drupal permissions. So, like let's say you just wanted to get a fresh database, restore it. You could just do that without disturbing anything else in the code that you're working on. Likewise with the Drupal files, and the permissions get messed up somehow, which happens frequently. You can just run this script and fix the permissions. So I tried to keep this modular and allow users to use it the way they want to use it. And I documented all of this as well with a lot of help from ChatGPT, to be honest. But so I trained everybody how to use this, and also left this documentation in case they forgot anything in the training. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me go back to my slides. And guess we can go to the Q&A, and you can ask any questions that you have about this.
This is really great, John. Do you want to show the cleanup? How we can get rid of one?
Yeah. Yep. So we can do the cleanup here. So basically, just clean up this Jonaldo 456. And just, dash cleanup. And I put a lot of prompts here, make sure everyone knows what's going to happen. So I have to type this in, the name of the subdomain, and then it goes through and cleans up all the resources. So modifies the Apache config, removes the DNS record, and then it tells you, if everything passed. If there was an error in one of these, it would show up here, and then could look and figure out what went wrong, but I guess I'll show you. It's gone. So now we don't have any Jonaldo 456. And if you try and go to the site, should get us there. So it's gone. So I guess talk a bit about the infrastructure. So for the infrastructure of the site, I used a Terraform. So as you can see here, EC2 is set up here. It's only accessible through the Stanford VPN. And it has a policy that allows it to to change Route 53, and also access EFS. Yeah, have this template which actually sets up the server. So we don't, now that it's in use, the script, we like, so the script, what it does is it creates the server. It has all the all the commands to install all the packages that we need. And injects the values for the different things that need to be added. So like EFS is being added to the what's it? Yeah, the FS tab, so it's mounted. Whenever it restarts, and I wanted to put all of this here just in case we need to update the server, because one thing that on our old development server is it got got old. We're trying to do manual updates on it, and eventually it became too much of a chore, which is why we created this process. So now if the development server, when the development server gets too old, we can just destroy it. We of course back up the files we need, but then we have this script. And likely we'll have to change a few of the things, like maybe there'll be a new PHP version, but we can, instead of like trying to update an old server, we can, just tweak the script and deploy a new one, with the latest version of Ubuntu. So this is, one of the challenges that that this project was need to overcome. I also have several, bunch of different configurations so that it automatically updates using unattended upgrades package and some other nice things that I thought developers would like different shells and yeah. So yeah, so that's most of Jonaldo. So does anyone have questions or comments?
Okay, well, thank you very much, John. Does anyone have any questions or would like to see something again? Very quiet group today. I can also stop recording if sometimes people feel more comfortable, but